Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samuel. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, we've lamented often, that we don't have Stoltenberg to kick around anymore. But now we have Mark Rutte, and Mark Rutte is now rapidly moving up in the ranks
Yes.
of somebody that
Yes.
we want to kick around a great deal. He delivered a speech yesterday in Germany that really was quite unhinged because he was essentially envisaging a World War II style war in Europe, on the European continent, and something that's going to happen quite soon. And so it was really quite a shocking display of essentially NATO's belligerence and why it's very likely that whatever happens in these negotiations or peace process or whatever in Ukraine, this conflict between NATO and Russia, that's going to continue. There's no
Oh yeah.
desire
Yeah.
whatsoever on the
Yeah.
part of
Well,
NATO land to bring this to an end.
as you pointed out long ago, because we were talking, there's ongoing frustration and even a point of contention among ourselves is how to understand the Russian war effort. Why the incrementalism? Why so slow? When history tells us the Red Army was a steamroller and stuff like, and it's how it's so very different. And you pointed out, and I think it's absolutely correct then, and it's correct now, is that Russia has to keep its powder dry,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
Because this is not going to end just in Ukraine. No way.
yeah. No, absolutely right. And so here is the speech, um, and so Rotes is sort of easy to make fun of. I mean, he kind of looks a little goofy and he sounds a little goofy. But when you read this, you can say this is quite a dark speech. And the thing this is the NATO Secretary-General, and he's talking about a war, World War II style of a fight in Europe. And so here he is. When I became NATO Secretary General last year, I warned that what is happening in Ukraine could happen to allied countries too, and that we have to shift to a wartime mindset. That's how he's beginning his speech. We have to shift to a wartime mindset.
A more rational person interested in security would start out saying, well, our peace initiatives and our overtures that we've been doing over the last 3 years, uh, unfortunately, have not been successful. But no, he can't say that because they've never tried it.
No,
Okay?
no, no. I have a particular issue with the way they write Allied with an uppercase A,
Yeah,
with a suggestion that this is a sort of the part of the World War II allies, the Allied powers.
exactly. Very
Yeah,
good point.
yeah,
But the
it just
problem is he
drives me up the
doesn't.
wall. NATO's always doing this. They're writing allies with this uppercase A.
Yes, but if you, Rutter, if he would do a little bit of serious thinking about this, and I loved the old World War II newsreels growing up. Um, Remember, the Soviet Union was an ally, okay? Okay?
Yeah, they seem to have forgotten that one.
Yeah, they've seemed to have forgotten that.
That's right, and that's right. And strangely enough, he's delivering this lecture in Germany, and
Yeah,
Germany was
there you
kind of
go.
on the other side. But hey,
Not one of the allies.
yes, but
Okay.
now he's one of the allies. Yes, that's right. Um, and then he talks, about the 5%, the familiar stuff, and then talks about that too many are quietly complacent, and too many don't feel the urgency. Too many believe that time is on our side. It is not. The time for action is now. Allied defense spending and production must rise rapidly. Our armed forces must have what they need to keep us safe. Keep us safe. Here we are. Oh, we're under threat. We're in danger. Who is making you unsafe? How are you got? How did you get yourself in a position if you are indeed unsafe? How did you get yourself into this position that you are now unsafe? Could it be the policies you pursued have made
Yeah.
you unsafe?
NATO makes you unsafe.
Exactly. That's exactly it. I mean, made them unsafe. And you could see even as his speech goes on and he gets more and more belligerent, you think with every word you utter, you are making everybody in NATO land less and less safe. Because if you're a Russian and you're reading this speech, you think, hey,
And
this
they
this,
and they
this is
are,
a call to arms. This is a call for war.
and they are, everyone.
Yeah,
They are reading it.
of course they are. And Ukraine must have what it needs to defend itself now. So the way he was, we're unsafe, and Ukraine must have what it needs to defend itself. So you're not defending yourself. You are waging a war in Ukraine. Ukraine is not in NATO. It is not a member of NATO. This was explicitly say Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So, but nonetheless, they wage this war against Russia and then say, "Oh, we're unsafe. We need to do something because we're under threat."
Well, maybe if they stopped waging war in Ukraine, they would become safe.
That maybe, yeah.
Mm.
Our governments, parliaments, and our citizens have to be in this together so that we can continue to protect peace, freedom, and prosperity, our open society, our free election, our free press. None of those things are in Europe.
Oh,
There's no
but look, I mean, our governments, our parliaments, okay, we can discuss those two issues, but you have to use a cattle prod to get your citizens to go along with it. Remember, everyone, this is an elite project, okay? There's no grassroots for this at all, zero.
right, right, exactly, exactly. None at all. But then we says peace, which you are now threatening. Freedom, I mean, that's a kind of a joke. I mean, you have in Germany, you have, if you insult Schmerz, Chancellor Schmerz, you could be prosecuted. I mean, it's like, that's now already a case in Germany that you could be prosecuted for insulting the German Chancellor. Prosperity, well, that's a joke. I mean, you're doing everything you can in order to sabotage your prosperity, and you don't have an open society. You're doing everything you can in order to make sure that there isn't any openness, and that you keep tight control on social media, actual media, our free elections. Well, yeah, let me. We we talk a lot about that. Um, and then he goes on, we must all we must all accept that we must act to defend our way of life now. Defend our way of life. So our way of life is under threat. Because this year Russia has become even more brazen, reckless, and ruthless towards NATO. Towards NATO, as if they're just picking a fight. NATO peacefully minding its own business, not doing any harm to anyone, just going about its daily life, getting the paper,
Yeah,
a
but
cup of coffee. And Russia is doing all these terrible things to NATO.
under the auspices of NATO, NATO is firing missiles into the Russian heartland, destroying civilian infrastructure, killing civilians. George, maybe I have been keeping up with the news here, but how many missiles has Russia fired into NATO land?
Not a single one. Not a
Not
single one. That's it. Because even all the allegation, oh, drones, drone this, drone that. There's no evidence. No evidence Russia fired them, or even if some drone wandered over into Polish territory, or that this was actually deliberately targeted by Russia rather than because of NATO jamming, GPS jamming, that the drone went off target. But either way, there were drones that were not carrying any these explosives on them. So that even that, all right, there were whatever surveillance drones. So that's Russia has not targeted any territory on NATO. NATO is targeting Russia, and NATO is the one that's under threat. I mean, this is the loony logic of NATO. And then he has the nerve, he has the insolence to say, during the Cold War, President Reagan warned about the aggressive impulses of an evil empire. Today, President Putin is in the empire building business again.
wow.
So, or go.
No, I mean, it just goes back to the obvious chain of events here. So, Russia's moving its military prowess towards NATO. Oh, no, it's NATO that's moving towards Russia.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, and the insolence of, okay, this was a very different time. This was during the Cold War. This is when the Soviet Union existed, when we had the still at the time a partition of Europe. I mean, come on, if you're going to use history, at least use it in a intellectually honest way.
Well, I think so, but I also think, incidentally, that um, when Reagan used that, this was the darkest moments of the Cold War. It was the very early 1980s.
Right.
Um, Even then, Reagan, this didn't go down particularly well when he talked about the evil empire. Even Cold Warriors, I remember even Cold Warriors like Robert Conquest
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
said,
yeah.
I think that's a mistake to use this kind of language, that it's incendiary. And given the tensions, I mean, those things were very tense between the East and
When
West at
was
that time. And
the
that this is just only, adding fuel to the fire.
when was the South Korean airliner shot
That was
down?
83. Yeah, 83.
83.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a very tense moment.
Yes, it was.
The shooting down of the South Korean airliner, and there were a number of incidents when there was real fear that there were people thinking that, hey, the Russians have launched a nuclear attack, and the Russians themselves thinking the West was launching a nuclear attack. This was a very, very tense time. Um, so we said that, and so at the time, people were afraid, that which unfortunately people lost that fear, but there was a fear that this could just get out of hand. And so when he said that about the evil empire, it did not go. Now it's sort of, oh, it's fantastic. Reagan said evil empire, but I lived through that time, and I remember did not go down well. People were thought this is incendiary. There's no need for this kind of rhetoric. But then it says Putin is in the empire. What empire is he building up?
And again, what is the again?
You're right. That's right. In the empire building business again. You know, I mean, we have to go back to history. The Soviet Union peacefully dissolved. I mean, you can argue, well, that was a huge, huge catastrophic series of decisions made by the Soviet leadership, but nonetheless, it dissolved very peacefully. And since then, there's been no attempts. There have been no attempts to reconstitute the Soviet Union. That was 1991. It's now 34 years. When was there any attempt to reconstitute the Soviet Union?
Well, and also, I mean, serious scholars and observers that studied the Cold War. George and I are the children of the Cold War. There's no evidence whatsoever that the Soviet Union was interested in attacking what we called then Western Europe,
Right,
NATO. There's no evidence of it all. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of evidence against that, the whole entire Helsinki process. What the Soviets wanted, they wanted the West to affirmatively recognize their gains during the Second World War. That was really important to the
right,
Soviets,
right,
very important.
right.
Not to expand
No,
is essentially, and I think what we've had for like over 50 years now, the Soviet Union just wanted to keep what it had,
right,
and I would make the argument that Russia's very much intent on keeping what it has. It's not interested in expansion.
right,
Okay, now that's talking geographically. Now there's a new element, and it's obviously a result of the lack of a coherent Cold War outcome. There's a lot of Russians outside of Russia. Okay, that's a real problem for any kind of Russian leadership. George and I talked about it, not on this podcast, but on my program before we started this podcast, is that we chronicled the events against the people of the Donbass. 14,000 plus people were slaughtered by the
right,
Kiev regime. Okay, so that's not really about geography. It's about, protecting your fellow ethnic
right.
Russian speakers
Yeah.
and ethnic Russians in general. So, I mean, I don't know, when we read things like this, George and I always ask ourselves the question, I mean, is it a lack of knowledge here? Is it, or, intentionally being dishonest? And probably the worst possible is both.
I suspect that it's both. Um, but that's the very interesting thing. I mean, because you talk about the Cold War, the Soviet Union wanted Western acknowledgement of the post World War II order. Now, what was that? Well, the Soviet Union wanted a set of buffer states as protection. Um, Now, not only did it lose those buffer states in from 89 to 91, it could have lived with that. Okay, we've lost the buffer states. They want to go. They want independence. They don't want communist rules. They were incorporated into NATO. That's a major geopolitical shift that NATO embarked upon to the detriment of Russia. So it's NATO that undertook a major geopolitical redrawing of the situation on the European continent. And that was always going to be a problem for Russia. It's one thing, okay, well, they can be neutral states, fine, they're no longer communist, they're neutral states, but instead they're now part of the NATO infrastructure. So that's NATO. That's a NATO act against Russia, and Russia put up with it, and put up all this time. An amazing
And also,
tolerance.
George, it's important to point out because you never get this from Rutte or Stoltenberg or rest of the NATO crowd here. It was hotly debated if it was a good idea
Yeah,
to expand the
right,
alliance.
right,
And I know our favorite George F. Kennan, but there were many, many more.
right, right. No,
Um,
there were.
and this was these were on the front pages of
Right,
broadsheets, what was known as Time Magazine and
right,
Newsweek.
right.
The New York Review of Books,
Yep,
and had an intense discussion about it over months.
right,
Okay. So it's not axiomatic that, oh, the Cold War's over, NATO must
right,
expand because,
right.
oh, no, they only volunteer. It's an open club and all this. No, that's not how security works. Russia has no veto. Yes, it does, because it impacts its security. Yes, it does have a veto.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, the reason why we always invoke Kennan, because Kennan, I think, articulated it most eloquently. He did it very early on. He did it in 1997 when the first candidates were put forward for NATO membership. He said, sooner or later, Russia will react, and it was going to be very unpleasant when Russia does react. He just said it. I mean, that was 1997. He was off by a quarter of a century. But he knew this is going to happen. He studied Russian history. Sooner or later, Russia will react, and it's going to be very, very unpleasant when it does react. And that was him. It was obvious to anyone that this is going to happen. But instead, the West seized this opportunity rather than try to work out some modus vivendi security architectures we talk about here with Russia. No, we're going to scoop these former allies of the Soviet Union. We're going to scoop them up, and they're going to become our allies with all their Russophobia, with all their guns pointed at Russia. And we just expect Russia to put up with this indefinitely.
And an important addition to all of that is something that's really important to me because I've lived in this part of the world for most of my life, not my adult life, my entire life. And one of the drives for NATO expansion, for me, it's personally painful because as a former historian, there's a lot of histories in Eastern Europe that were swept away with NATO membership. Oh, we've always been democratic. We've always been good liberals and all of that. No, all these countries, with very few exceptions, have very dark histories of the 20th century.
Right,
And they've been swept away, George. They've
right,
been swept away
right,
because it's politically prudent to, oh, yes, they're axiomatically, they're anti-Russian. Well, they're very racist. There's a lot of racism. There is also ethnic hatred of other groups. There were persecutions and a very long history of that. And they get washed clean.
they,
They
they
were
get they get they
they
get
were
rid.
their dirty political past was laundered.
Right, that's right. But of course, a lot of it is you know they now respond to the new master. So the new master is NATO, and NATO encourages Russophobia. So NATO encourages this kind of hostility, this whipping up this hostility. You got countries like Bulgaria. Bulgarians don't hate Russians. They never have.
Well,
Bulgaria was always of all the Soviet Warsaw Pact states, Bulgaria was always the most well disposed towards the Soviet Union. Now they've been trying to whip up anti-Russian feeling, and we see how NATO operates. I mean, look what they're trying to do in Serbia. Daily they're trying to say, "You got to join us. You got to join us. You got to impose. Remove all traces of Russian influence in your country." So this is all of this. You could say you're preparing for war. This is
yeah, and one of the preparations, it's very important. One of the preparations for this war go through, most people won't do it. George and I do it by accident because we study this, okay? I don't catalog it, but a light always goes off in my head. I go, yep, yeah, that's right. And what am I talking about? We're talking about Bulgaria. Okay, look who the politicians are in Bulgaria. How many of them work for the World Bank, the IMF,
right,
went through Atlantis' think tanks?
right,
Okay, I mean it's the proportion of these people that have been groomed
right.
by Western institutions. It's phenomenal. Also, all through these countries, the waves of NATO induction. How many of them actually have American passports? It's remarkably high. Or
Yeah,
marriage. A spouse, is an American or
right, right. Yep,
they're parachuted in. Oh, never. Oh, he was born here and he was gone for 40 years and he's been back. He's a real patriot.
yep,
Okay.
yeah.
It happens all over the
Well,
place.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, none of them. They work in the World Bank. I mean, Maya Sandu is the classic case. And there's many others. You just sort of parachute them in, and they're expected to pursue the NATO agenda. That's the whole point of training them. You train them. They spend time at the American universities, and that's the whole point. That's essentially when they're recruited by the CIA, by the U.S. government. Yeah. Then you go back and impose our
Bareback
rules.
360. Bareback 360. Who was her classmate at Oxford? Radek Sikorsky.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. That's when it happened. That's when it happened. They recruited Radek Sikorsky. And so and there he is. I mean, and we can see we've talked about this before. Radek Sikorsky doesn't do anything to benefit Poles. He's always got the British American agenda, especially the British agenda. Anyway, so here he goes. They're talking about these casualties. There have been over 1.1 million Russian casualties since he began his war in 2022. And this year, Russia has lost on average 1,200 troops a day. Think about that. More than 1 million casualties so far and 1,200 a day killed or wounded this year alone. Putin is paying for his pride with the blood of his own people. And if he's prepared to sacrifice ordinary Russians in this way, what is he prepared to do to us? That is such a stupid thing to say. I mean, it's almost kind of breathtaking. What is he prepared to do to us? I mean, leave aside these ridiculous numbers. That was
Yeah.
where are you getting these numbers from? Because anyone who has compiled numbers have not come up with numbers. Seriously compiled numbers have not come up with numbers on that magnitude. But what is he prepared to do to us? What what makes you think he wants to do anything to you? I mean, but he's going to do something to us. Why do you think he wants to do something to you?
Well, NATO countries are certainly doing things to
Yeah,
Russians.
exactly, exactly. So
In his, oh yeah, here's the word that was in my mind. He uses it now. Distorted. Continue, George.
in his distorted view of history and the world, Putin believes that our freedom threatens his stranglehold on
Oh,
power and that we want to destroy Russia.
okay, I really don't even want the level of stupidity there does not even deserve a retort. Okay,
Right.
they want our freedom. They hate our freedoms. Okay, come on,
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, yeah, man, that's right.
Yeah, you're dwindling freedoms. Yeah, right.
That's right. But it's very funny because you're absolutely right. Because that was the one, remember, that came after the 9/11 attacks. They hate us for our freedoms. And then, of course, bin Laden goes into great details as to why he hates the United States. You can certainly disagree with bin Laden, but he doesn't say, what I hate about the United States is that there's all this personal freedom. I hate it when there are people who have freedom. The last thing we want in our country is personal freedom. And then he says, Putin is doing a good job of all that by himself. Russia's economy is now geared to wage war, not to make its people prosperous. Russia is spending nearly 40% of its budget on aggression, and around 70% of all machine tools are used in military production. Taxes are going up, inflation has skyrocketed, petrol is rationed. And
Petro is not rationed. Okay.
right. And then he says Putin's next presidential campaign slogan should be make Russia weak again. Okay, so if that's the case, what are we talking about? If Russia's so weak, why are you whipping up this
Yeah, I
hysteria?
mean, we always get to, I've framed this for, I guess, well over a decade now. Everybody, you have a choice. Russia's either 007 or Keystone Cops, but you can't have both at the
Uh,
same time. Okay,
exactly.
you have to choose. Okay,
Right.
Russia will be at the gates of Paris if we don't do something. But the Russians are still fighting in the
Right.
Donbass.
That's right.
Huh? Sorry, can you explain why
That's
that's the case?
that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So but it's very interesting, because look, it's easy to make fun of Rutte. There's much to make fun of him, but people like Rutte, they're not stupid. I mean, they've been at the top of the
He's
greasy pole
desperate.
of politics. Yeah, but they've been
He's
there.
desperate here.
Yeah, okay. He's been prime minister of the Netherlands, so I don't know how many years now. He got that job. Remember, the Americans were vetoing every single candidate for that position, and until he finally came along. So he has a certain cleverness and cunning. So you have to think there is a cunning here, and the cunning, of course, is to get the public frothing at the mouth about Russia, and at the same time, there's nothing to worry about because they're ridiculously weak. They're gonna collapse. They're gonna fold as soon as we raised our NATO fist.
He always reminds me of, I'm going to really stretch people's memory here. Remember Maximum Headroom, Max Headroom?
That's a long time ago. Yes. Yes.
A long time ago. That was probably the first AI
Mm,
ever
right.
invented. Okay, okay. It's. I don't want to waste time explaining it, but I mean, but this is again kind of a very weak argumentation. Is that Putin's next presidential slogan should be "Make Russia weak again." I mean, is he trying to be clever? I
Yes.
mean, there are a lot of people that speak English as a second language extremely well. I mean, and I'm always admired it. Okay,
Well, the Dutch particularly.
but what? Yeah, and yeah, there's a special reason to hate the Dutch because they speak like six languages. Okay, but it humor almost never translates. They just don't get
Right.
the humor.
Right.
Okay, so he thinks he's being clever. He's kind of dumb by saying
Gotcha.
that.
Yeah. No, that's right. Um, and then, and how is Putin able to continue his war against Ukraine? The answer is China.
China,
China.
China, China.
China. China is Russia's lifeline. China wants to prevent its ally from losing in Ukraine. Without China's support, Russia could not wage this war. 80% of critical electronic components and Russian drones and other systems are made in China. So when civilians die in Kiev or Kharkiv, Chinese technology is often inside the weapons that kill them. And then it talks about North Korea and Iran. Now
Yeah, but
let's say okay, let's just assume okay whether it's right or not. Let's assume it's right. Let's assume that okay everything you say is right. Why do you think it was such a great idea to push Russia and China into this close partnership? That one country is the biggest by territory in the world, another country is the biggest by population in the world, and that united and that against NATO. That's not a smart move. That's not good politics.
yeah, but couldn't you just say Ukraine couldn't fight this war without NATO's help? I mean, you can
Yeah,
easily
absolutely.
flip the script all of the
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why they're continually whining. I mean, they were whining about Trump this and Trump that, and Trump is letting us down. But that's because you're not able to fight this war without the United States. So, I mean, you're complaining about China. Look, you're complaining North Korea. You're complaining North Korea. You've got the biggest economies in the world, the United States, the Western Europe, plus you've got South Korea, Japan, all chipping in. These are the biggest, most powerful economies in the world, all lined up for Ukraine. And you're complaining about North Korea and Iran? So far, Putin has only played the peacemaker when it suits him to buy time to continue his war. I want to say, interestingly, he uses this Putin. It's Putin, Putin, Putin. He never brings up Russia. And again, that's a deliberate move. Because if
Yeah,
you were to
yeah.
talk about Russia, then of course you'd have to talk about, well, why does Russia do this? What is there an issue
What?
with Russia? No, let's make it all just about Putin.
Yeah, yeah. When Putin goes, everything will be fine. We've heard this with Gaddafi, Assad,
Yep.
Saddam Hussein. Milosevic. Okay, this is the desperately seeking the new Hitler
Right.
meme.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. Trump wants to end the bloodshed now, and he's the only one who can get Putin to the negotiating table. So let's put Putin to the test. Let's see if he really wants peace or if he prefers the slaughter to continue.
Yeah, but he did come to the peace table.
He did come to the peace table, yeah?
Oh, and did the Europeans invite Russia to the peace table? No.
No.
No, no. So, I mean, you're not doing anything, okay? Trump is struggling with it because the problem is that the United States is a co-belligerent in this conflict, and it's nearly impossible to be a mediator, okay?
Right.
That's
No,
the
that's
crux.
right. But to be fair, I think, to be fair to Trump, I think he does want to get out of this. I mean, it's very
There's
difficult.
no doubt about that.
Yeah, but I think, yeah.
No, it is Eric Trump is a very good barometer on this, okay? Because I assume that Eric has spends a lot of time in the West Wing, okay? And he knows exactly what his father's thinking is, okay? And he's a good sounding board for Trump, particularly on Ukraine.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's essential that all of us keep the pressure on Russia, support the genuine efforts to bring this war to an end. NATO support means Ukraine can defend itself today and be in a strong position to secure a just and lasting peace and to be able to deter any Russian aggression in the future. So this
Yeah,
is,
but
this is
what we keep hearing secure a just and lasting peace. That is a meaningless phrase
of
in the
course, it's meaning
context
it, but
of the
they all repeat.
General Secretary of NATO.
That's right. But it's very interesting how you create the buzzword, and then everyone repeats it. Every single
Yeah.
NATO government uses exactly the same phraseology: secure and just and lasting peace. It's like something, somebody issues a kind of a talking points. You're now to repeat this. It's like, you remember we had the unconditional ceasefire. So everyone now repeats unconditional ceasefire, unconditional ceasefire. Um,
And then George and I could do this all night. Okay, then it transitioned to security guarantees,
Security
security
guard,
guarantees.
exactly,
We just,
security guard.
I mean,
Yeah,
this is, on my program yesterday, I told my guests after we finished the recording, I said, you know, you guys have done this program many, many times. We've talked about the ebbs and flows of how the West characterizes this. But gentlemen, the three of them, I said, you've been on this program since the beginning, and none of us have changed our perception or our description of what's going on here. They're constantly trying to find something that will go at the heartstrings or make it it's always emotional. This is all emotional. This is not none of this is empirically based. None of it.
you're absolutely right. It's very interesting that it is all emotional because none of them can actually make the case for continuing with this war. I mean, so you can only make, oh well, it's emotional. Oh, the children,
Children.
they've abducted the children. Or Ukraine, we got to do this for Ukraine. Poor little Ukraine. We got to fight for Ukraine. But none of it ever really presents a serious case as a, well, why is it in our national interest, which is after all what you're supposed to address. Well, how is this in any way beneficial to any NATO state to continue with this war?
Yeah, and George, I mean, the most obvious reaction outside of the propaganda that people are pumped up with, particularly on Twitter, it's really intense. So, Rudy Fruity, so war is coming. What are you doing
Right.
as General Secretary of this alliance
Right.
to avoid this war?
Right.
Where is it in your speech?
Right.
What must be done?
Um,
And if you're making the claim the coming conflict is going to be on a World War II
yeah.
level, well, are you aware what happened to Europe
Yeah.
between 1939 and
Right.
1945? Are
Right.
you aware of that?
That's right. That's
That
right.
was catastrophic.
You're absolutely right, and that's what's so striking about this is he's predicting, oh, this and this will happen. Okay, so why aren't you doing anything to prevent this? Why are you doing everything in order to make sure that this in fact does happen? Um, it's like you remember when Biden, I think it was in the fall of 2022, he says, we are closer to a nuclear apocalypse. They're closer now than we have been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, well, what are you doing to stop that? You're the president of the United States, and if that's the case, then shouldn't you absolutely, make sure that this doesn't happen? And then, oh well, you just make these statements, and the media report it, and then that's it, and then you continue with the same policy as before. Anyway, it says but this is where he says, oh, billions of dollars of worth of critical military hardware is flowing into Ukraine, sourced from the United States, paid for by allies and partners. This is firepower only America can provide. We are doing this through a NATO initiative called Pearl. And then says, Pearl has supplied around 75% of all missiles for Ukraine's Patriot batteries, 90% of the ammunition used in its air defense systems, and I want to thank Germany and all other allies for their support. Pearl is keeping Ukraine in the fight and protecting its populations, and I count indeed on more allies to contribute to Pearl and to step up the support to Ukraine in many other ways. So you're going to continue with this policy, and then you say, "Oh well, we're under attack. We're under attack. We're in danger." So everything is saying, oh
Well,
well,
you know what they're doing? They're just endangering the lives of the people of Ukraine.
of course they are. Absolutely they are. You put weapons into a war zone. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to be shot up. They're going to be attack these weapons, and yeah, there is going to
Yeah,
be
but see,
collateral damage. Civilians are going to
okay,
get killed.
okay, all the little numbers thrown in here. Okay, so how does that go toward what is it? What's the phrase? A secured and what kind of peace is
Oh,
it?
just and lasting peace.
Just and lasting peace. How does all of this paragraph here, bring about a lasting peace? How?
No,
Where's the connection?
none at all. And you got to keep in mind, all this time they weren't interested in any kind of talks at all. They're only talking about it now because of since Trump came into office, and now they're all pretending that they want some kind of a just and lasting peace, which they weren't. I mean, the NATO's position up until the time of Trump coming into office, more or less, Ukraine within the 1991 borders. They didn't say it explicitly, but essentially, it's Ukraine within the 1991 borders. And so, we're going to win. We're going to win this war. So, but now, oh, we want negotiations. Just imagine if Putin got his way, Ukraine under the boot of Russian occupation. So you bring, the Ukraine under the jackboot of Russian occupation.
Yeah,
It,
saying this in Germany of all places.
yes, exactly, and it's funny, yeah, exactly under the boot of Russian occupation. Well, that of course, begs a lot of questions. Like in the Ukraine and Russians, they're kind of close people. I mean, it's not like under the boot of German occupation when hey, you've got nothing in common with the Germans, but Ukrainians and Russians. But okay. His forces pressing against a longer border with NATO. Who pushed the NATO borders up there? I
Who
mean,
made them NATO borders?
his forces pressed against a longer border with NATO.
Russia is moving towards our NATO borders. Oh my
That's right.
God.
That's right. You've moved your border 1,000 miles east, and now they're going to be pressing against your border. You moved your borders to press against Russia. Um, and the significantly increased risk of an armed attack against us. Well,
Well, I don't know, George, if a year ago a band of very violent people were like 10 blocks away, I'd be worried. But now it's right next to me. Okay.
Right.
I haven't moved.
Right.
Okay. It's coming to me.
Right. That's right. That's the point. It's coming to Russia. And then he says, oh, then the risk of an armed attack against us. Well, if you do what you do, you get yourself into this Ukraine war, there is a danger of an armed attack but fundamentally, you have destabilized the situation on the continent. If you're a leader of Russia, you think, look, those Baltic states. I mean, we've put up with this for quite a long time. That's a vital piece of real estate. They're just a few miles away from St. Petersburg. We really can't indefinitely accept NATO a few miles away from St. Petersburg. So if you want to ensure an attack on the Baltic states, then keep doing what you're doing. Because ultimately, if we're talking about a just and lasting peace, I'm not sure you can have a just and lasting peace if NATO continues to try to make the Baltic a NATO lake.
Yeah, well, also, Rudy Fruity, keep doing what you're doing, okay? Because there could be an incident, and the likelihood of an incident increases only in through time with speeches like this.
Right.
So something happens. So let's say with Estonia. So everybody's going to get around the campfire and say, yes, let's invoke Article 5. Well, there's going to be some that say, well, you know, we kind of were pushing hard there. I mean, what about Article 1 of the
Right.
treaty? You just want to talk about Article 5. What I'm just saying, and I've said this from the very beginning, that it's not impossible. Actually, it's becoming more and more probable that we're going to get an Article 5 because that's where NATO is right now.
Right.
It needs an Article 5
Right.
to push on because it doesn't have the money.
Right.
It doesn't have an end game.
Right.
They got a hand of deuces right now. That's why I worry
Right. No,
about
I
this
agree.
escalation.
I agree, and that's why when you read these kinds of speeches, you think, well, okay, this is what NATO's thinking. They're preparing for a war.
No,
Um,
they're not to disagree with you, but I would say it in a different way. They're preparing to get the United States into a war.
exactly. No, that's absolutely right. That's the idea. They know perfectly well they can't fight a war
They
against
can.
Russia by themselves. That's the whole point. That's why whenever they talk with Ukraine about the security guarantees, he goes and Keir Starmer's the one who said it with an American backstop. That's it. You're not
Yeah,
going to
I
offer
mean,
security
George and I
guarantees. No one thinks a British security guarantee is worth anything. You have to have the Americans there as a
look.
backstop.
On Monday we had the E3.
That's right.
I hate. I can't find a. I wish it was the I3. Then you could say like idiot 3. But anyway, I'm working on it. But what do they all? What does Starmer, Macron, and Merz? At the end of the day, what is it all about? We'll talk to Trump. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's all they got.
That's all. That's right. That's right. And that's what this whole security guarantees is, because they can talk to their heart's content. Oh, we're ready to issue a security guarantees, but it lacks anything that's reasonably plausible. Let's say in the final settlement, oh well, we're going to station French troops in Ukraine as part of the security guarantee. Well, they're obviously going to be targeted. They'll be legitimate targets. And then he said, well, are you going to come in and defend us? And the Americans will say no. Well, that's it. Well, if they're not going to come in, then they're not going to be any French troops based in Ukraine. That's as simple as that. I mean, that's
Okay, well,
oh,
Macron,
we're ready to provide security guarantees only if the Americans are going to support you.
Macron, if you send French troops there, what your public opinion rating is like 10 or less right now? I think it's 8 or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
One French soldier dies,
Yep.
you're done,
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
Because that'll be the blood on your
Yep.
hands, okay?
Yep.
These people are absurd.
Yep.
You
Yep.
do not take them. They should not have power. They are dangerous.
You're absolutely right. Um, and that's it. I mean, now we have this Lance Corporal, the British Lance Corporal, who got killed in Ukraine, and it helps that the media are remarkably incurious as to the circumstances of his death. He was an active duty soldier. Oh, it was a tragic accident. It was a tragic accident. Well, what was he doing? I mean, oh, he was
Was
just
he vacationing? Was he vacationing there?
exactly. Was it a car accident? You know, just driving on the wrong side of the road. You know, the British notoriously they drive on the wrong side of the road. Oh, he was just observing defensive weapons. It was far, far, far away from the front line. Well, how was he killed? I mean, you're just observing your defense equipment. Why would you be killed? But the British media lacking in any curiosity. But um, you know, the government, the British government knows that he has to lie to the public. You know, because I know if they, was ever any suggestion that he's actually involved in combat without any debate in Parliament about getting involved in this war, anything like that, then there's going to be serious consequences. And that's why they have to lie to the media. Oh, he was nowhere near the fighting. He was just observing. He was just sitting there having a cup of coffee, just observing, and then whoops, a tragic accident. Like what happened? Oh, I don't, just a tragic accident. So that's the same thing. You know, the moment they start getting killed, and it becomes clear that they are involved in active combat, I think then public opinion we just simply will not accept this. They will just say this is
Hey,
insane.
you've taken our social programs, you've bankrupted the country, and now you're killing our men. Yeah, okay, that's a winning ticket. That's a
That's
real winner.
that's right. That's it. That's exactly. And then it will require a truly gargantuan shift in our deterrence and defense. NATO would have to substantially increase its military presence along the eastern flank, and allies would have to go much further and faster on defense spending and production. In such a scenario, we would long for the days when 3.5% of GDP on core defense was enough. Oh, that number would grow massively. And with the imminent threat, we would have to act fast.
Yeah, but again, I don't understand the logic here. So you have decided that NATO must go to war. So we don't debate that. There's no debate about that, right? Okay. And so this is supposed to, so this gargantuan effort, how is that going to be deterrence? Because if Russia sees massing of troops on its borders with NATO, then you make the possibility of a conflict even greater. He doesn't understand the word deterrence, I
No,
guess.
he doesn't, and that's why when I brought up with the Baltic states, I think is where I think it's kind of salient because if we were back with 1939, 1940, Stalin is expecting this the onslaught from Nazi Germany. So what do? Well, you have to do what you can to anticipate this attack, and therefore you want to move your borders as far west as is possible. So what does he do? He, issues his demands to the Baltic states and issues his demands to Finland. I mean, those are all very, very shrewd strategic moves on his part in anticipation of an attack, and that's the whole point now. Oh, we're under threat. Well, any Russian leader will say, "Look, this war with NATO is inevitable, and then we have to start thinking about, moving our front lines as far west as possible." So that's why you're creating absolutely the certainty that there would be a war. I mean,
Well,
because yeah, go on.
you and I are the only two that have said it that I'm aware of and I think it needs to be brought into the conversation. Is NATO one of its contingency plans preparing to attack Russia?
Yeah. Well, they've
It,
talked about it. They've
it,
talked
it
about
has to be part of the conversation
yeah,
given this speech,
that's right. Well, they've talked about it. You remember we talked about that Italian general talking
right?
about
Right?
yeah. Um, so anyway, the so let's not forget Ukraine's security is our security.
No, your policy on Ukraine has made Europe insecure. Come on,
Insecure.
wake up.
Yeah. So NATO's own defenses can hold for now. But with its economy dedicated to war, Russia could be ready to use military force against NATO within 5 years. So whenever you read that, you mean, okay, That's always projection. That's okay. Russia could be ready to use military force against NATO within 5 years. In other words, you are preparing to use force against Russia within 5 years. I mean,
5 years.
it's always. I mean, that's a giveaway when you say something like that. It's like you don't have any basis for making that claim. So therefore, why are you making the claim? Well, obviously,
Well,
this is the plan.
also it's kind of interesting because when you look at the electoral calendar of European countries, I mean, 5 years kind of makes it apolitical. Whereas, irrespective of who, NATO will soldier on, irrespective of every time one of these centrist liberal leaders fall, and they keep following like bowling pins. Okay, but NATO is above it, above the fray. What it is it's it's demanding that there be no debate. This is our policy, and you
Right.
just have to suck it up. Okay.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. And that means that they're already laying it on the line for any of these, right-wing populist parties. You have to get with this program because if
Exactly.
you don't, we're going to make sure that you will never win any elections.
Exactly. Meaning this policy of going to war trumps any kind of democratic process.
Exactly. So it's like, the Maloneyization of every kind of right-wing political party. You have to get with the program. We'll have you, Le Pen, as president, but you have to follow this line. You can have the AFD, in government, but you have to follow this line. You can see how Nigel Farage is completely already, absolutely fallen into line with this. He's as belligerent as anyone in the UK, where in the past he used to be quite sensible on this. So that's what they're like within 5 years. So that we will brook no opposition. Russia is already escalating its covert campaign against our societies. And here we go. Russia's list of targets for sabotage is not limited to critical infrastructure, defense industry, and military facilities. There have been attacks on commercial warehouses, shopping centers, explosives hidden in parcels, and Poland is now investigating sabotage against its railway network. I was under the impression that they concluded within 2 hours that it was Russia. I didn't know there was still an investigation going on. I mean, I thought that they just made that decision, and I don't even remember, was the railway network damaged? I mean, apparently
No,
the train went over that explosive device without even noticing that there was an explosive device, so it couldn't have done a lot of damage.
I've been on that rail line.
This year, we have seen reckless airspace violations by Russia, whether it is drones over Poland and Romania or fighter jets over Estonia. Such incidents put lives in danger and raise the risk of escalation. I love this, lives in danger, raise the risk of escalation. Even as he was talking about the billions that we're sending into Ukraine, which apparently don't raise the risk of escalation. And while we often think of risk primarily in terms of our eastern flank, Russia's reach is not limited to land. Arctic, Atlantic are additional avenues, a reminder yet again of why this alliance has been so crucial for so many years on both sides of the Atlantic. So they're everywhere. Russia is everywhere.
But again, here we go. This is always the used car salesman pitch. This justifies the existence of our alliance. Okay, they
Exactly.
always have to do that.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, they
absolutely.
always have to
Yeah,
do
that
that.
always do that.
It's never interests his little brain that this whole Atlantis project has created instability and allowed the largest war in Europe since the Second World War.
That's right.
They can't connect
No,
those dots.
no,
Those are the most obvious dots to
exactly.
connect,
That's
everyone.
it, exactly. Exactly. Um, so we are working together to ensure the safety and security of the line of all allies on land, the sea, and the air. We have increased our vigilance, Eastern Sentry, the Baltic Sentry. NATO's response to Russia's provocations has been calm, decisive, and proportionate. Calm, right?
Like this speech.
Yeah, exactly. Very calm and proportionate. But we need to be prepared for further escalation and confrontation. And then we need to be ready because at the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, conflicts are no longer fought at arm's length. Conflict is at our door. Russia has brought war back to Europe, and we must be prepared for the scale of war our grandparents, or great grandparents endured. So that we have to be prepared for the scale of war our grandparents or great grandparents endured. So we have to be prepared to fight World War II.
Yeah, and all the while, everyone, all across Europe, you're not allowed to have a debate on this topic.
No, no, there's no debate. That's the extraordinary thing. There's no debate. I mean, he's saying all this. No one elected him to anything. I mean, what the hell is a NATO Secretary-General? Why is he making these kinds of speeches? Imagine it, a conflict reaching every home, every workplace, destruction, mass mobilizations, millions displaced, widespread suffering, and extreme losses.
Oh, I don't think that's going to happen to you. Okay.
I don't
I'm
think so.
sure you'll fly out to who knows. I mean, these people never pay
No,
are held responsible for the costs of
no,
others
never,
or
never,
the
never,
costs that others have to
no,
endure.
never do. And they also make sure that their own children are not
Yeah.
going to serve in the armed forces. It's always other people's children are going to serve. Um, And then, it is terrible thought, but if we deliver on our commitments, this is a tragedy we can prevent. NATO is here to protect 1 billion people on both sides of the Atlantic. Our mission is to protect you, your families, your friends, and your future. We cannot let down our guard, and we won't. I count on our governments to keep up with their commitments, go further and faster, because we cannot falter or fail. Listen to the sirens across Ukraine. Look at the bodies piled from the rubble and think of the Ukrainians who might go to sleep tonight and not wake up tomorrow. What's standing between what's happening to them and what could happen to us? Only NATO. So, yeah.
George, there was only one Churchill, controversial figure for sure, but everybody tries to channel their inner Churchill. He tried to do it here, and
Right.
it failed.
Yeah, that's right. But the thing when you get to a speech like this, um, is that I mean I think as you put it, there's nothing here about well how do we avoid this? What do we need to do to make sure this doesn't happen? I mean you've now described what a world war is like. Yeah, it's going to be very very nasty. So how do we avoid it? What do we need to do in order to avoid it? And because of course they're not interested in avoiding it, they're interested in provoking it, and they pretty much put their cards on the table and said, well, this is what we're going to do. We're now getting ready for a war within the next 5 years. So everything we're doing now, we increasing our defense spending, getting into debt, and everything else is in preparation for this war. And it's it's it, it's extraordinary that just how little debate there is in Europe, obviously, but even in the United States. They just think that we can have this war and it's at an arm's length. It's not really going to affect us very much. We can just posture and nothing. It's not going to affect us.
It's very interesting that if you like from a literary critique trajectory, it's like a sermon. He read a sermon,
Right.
okay? He's not appealing to your intellectual
Yes.
faculties whatsoever. He's appealing to fear,
Right, sir.
okay?
Right.
And if this isn't a speech about, it's a provocation. It's provoking what he thinks is going to happen. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
I mean, Russia has no right to self-defense, apparently.
Right.
You move, the eastern flank. What are we at? A war? I mean, they use warlike language even.
Exactly. That's right. Eastern flank. Exactly. We have to move our, eastern flank. Um, and then said, "Oh, they're coming up against NATO's borders. These are NATO's borders. You shove these borders
Yeah,
right
but
up."
they're Russia's borders too, everyone. My goodness. I mean, it's been said many times before, but I mean, if a military alliance in the Caribbean with China at the lead, this would be unacceptable to the United States. I mean, even with limited Chinese economic and financial presence in South America, they're going to go to war with Venezuela and other countries, I would imagine. Okay, it's not there's no military threat to the United States.
But
There's no need to use the military. If it is about drug smuggling, then it's a police matter.
right. But it's very interesting because, of course, it was always accepted by obviously by the entire United States political class, but also the class of Europe, that the United States had every reason to prevent any kind of a military presence of a hostile superpower anywhere within the Western Hemisphere. So even when the Cuba, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, okay, they let the Castro government stay on, but the Soviets never attempted to set up a base there, or never tried to do have a military presence in Cuba or a military presence anywhere else. And despite all the allegations, the Soviet Union never tried to build a military presence, because if they had, the United States would have invaded and removed the government there, and would have removed any Soviet forces there. Everyone knew that that's it, and no one would have raised any objections. No one ever raised any objections when, essentially, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States made clear that they would invade Cuba and remove any Soviet missiles based in Cuba, and that was axiomatic. So if people are able to grasp the logic of that, then you have to, well, why aren't you able to grasp the logic of Russia? Russia does not want foreign military presence on its borders. It just simply, it's a crucial, vital security concern of Russia's.
And why? Because Russia has the power and strategy to make that happen. I mean, they are not a passive actor. See, Russia's always passive in all of this.
Right,
Okay,
right,
it I think of Scott Horton's book Provoked. I mean, here we go. This is the next chapter of Provoked.
right. That's right. That's right. So that whole argument, well, it's a sovereign decision. It's a sovereign decision. It's a sovereign decision on Ukraine's part. Well, if you accept the principle that it's not a sovereign decision on Cuba's part, or Nicaragua's part, or Maduro's part, that they can station Russian or Chinese forces on their territory, you're able to accept that, then you're able to accept that Russia has a right to determine what foreign military forces are stationed in countries that border Russia.
And particularly if they have made it patently clear that they're hostile to Russia.
Hostile. That's it. It's a hostile military alliance. And basically, you cannot. It's just simply absolutely ridiculous to think that Russia is going to tolerate it. So, oh, it's a sovereign decision. Well, it isn't really a sovereign decision. You know that it's not a sovereign decision. Obviously, it's not a sovereign decision. You don't have a right to threaten the security of others. It's like, oh, it's a sovereign
Well,
decision.
and at least when it comes to the European context, that was something that the West accepted
Yeah,
in the 1970s, at
yeah,
least,
yeah,
and 80s. They
yeah.
accepted that. Okay.
Okay.
Now that is no longer a part of their vocabulary. And it's very interesting. You and I picked up on this. It's when the Russian Foreign Ministry started talking about, and you have it encyclopedically remembered all of the different security conferences and the indivisibility of security. And the Russian Foreign Ministry went through all of those conferences and they talked about the idea of indivisibility of security. And then suddenly it popped up in the State Department, which
Right, right,
for decades it had
right,
disappeared.
right.
And
That's
and
it.
and with somebody in the State Department say, "Oh, they're using a vocabulary that we helped invent because the Russians were it was
Right,
mutual, using it against us." And then, of
right,
course, they mangled it and distorted what it means.
right, right. That no, that's right. And
Isn't it, indivisibility of security? That's a Putin talking point. Yes, it's so ridiculous. Okay.
yes, that's right. Um, and that's it. And I think when Trump says this is a war that should never have happened, Trump is really onto something. I mean, it's very important. This is a war that should never have happened. Now, his hands are not clean. I mean, he during his first term, he did sign off on sending lethal weapons to Ukraine. You know, shouldn't have done that, and he still boasts about it. But in principle, he is correct. It's a war that should never have happened. I mean, it was absolutely an insane policy to try to induct Ukraine into NATO, and that was always the plan. It was, and it's clear that it was always the plan. And however much Michael McFaul and Sikorsky and others, oh no, it was never a plan. It was never. No one ever envisaged
Well, I
this.
mean, during that debate, Mearsheimer, Waltz, McFaul, and Sikorsky, it was, I think it was either Waltz or Mearsheimer said that Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, said that I'm paraphrasing. This is our goal is to weaken and strategically defeat Russia. And when it went to the McFaul side, they said, no, I don't. He shouldn't have said. Because Lloyd Austin said
This
he's
is-
like got a cat out of the bag.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And Lloyd Austin also said the road to NATO membership for Ukraine is open, or either the road is open or the door is open. And he said that in October 2021. October 2021, in which case he probably sealed the fate of Ukraine when he made that utterance. I think he was in Georgia at the time, and he basically said, "Yeah, the door is open." Well, that's it. So you can't go around saying, "Oh, there was no plan whatsoever to bring Ukraine into NATO." So how come you kept repeating in every single NATO summit
Yeah,
that
that's
Ukraine will
such
be
an
a
interesting.
member of
It's not
NATO?
about NATO. It's not about
Not
NATO.
about NATO.
It's
That's it.
like it's so funny.
Yeah. It's not about NATO. That's about freedom. Anyway, so I think I think it was worth going into that at some length because this is Rutte, who who's this kind of goofy guy, talks about daddy and everyone. It's not easy to laugh at him, but there he is. He goes to Germany and makes this essentially a call for war cry in Germany, and the German audience was obviously lapping it up.
Yeah, well, we'll see. This new security document that was released by the Trump administration, which is still being talked about at great length. We'll see how the Trump people view that. I mean, again, it's getting more and more. Well, if you Europeans, if that's what you want to do with your time and money, and
Right,
go knock yourself out.
right, right.
But
No, that,
this is in a very slimy European passive aggressive way. This is a knock at the administration.
yes,
Obviously
I agree. Absolutely agree. I absolutely agree.
they're
That's it.
smarmy people,
The
okay?
Swami and yeah, absolutely.
Because they're smarter. He's just a real estate mogul. Well, no, he was elected.
Yeah,
Okay, it doesn't matter if he was a stand-up comedian
right,
or a gardener. It doesn't matter.
right.
What matters is
Exactly
he has a mandate,
right.
and you don't. Nobody elected you to anything.
Yeah, and one should say that that supposedly there's going to be yet another one of these meetings
Oh,
on Saturday, yet another meeting between the Europeans and the Americans. I just want to show you Trump's response when he was asked about this meeting that's going to take place in Paris. So we're always going to go to Paris over the weekend. You can have some nice food and everything. So
oh my God. These wartime leaders. Oh my God.
yeah. All right, let me just find this. Um, so here it is, and so he's asked about these Zelensky plans. And then so here is Trump, and apropos of this meeting with the Europeans.
Tell us about the leaders of France, Germany, and UK. All very good leaders, very good friends of mine, and we discussed.
I love the way he always says, "All very good friends of mine." I mean, they're not good friends of his, but he always inserts that they're good friends of mine.
Ukraine, pretty strong words, and we'll see what happens. We're waiting to hear answers before we progress. We'll find out. Look, there are a lot of things happening right now. A lot of people say it's closer than it's ever been. It's a war that would have never started. If I were president, would have never started. It's a war that should never have started. But we'll have it figured out, I think, within a pretty short. You say very strong terms. I think we had some little disputes about people, and we're going to see how it turns out.
And when you say that the European leaders want to have a meeting over the weekend, are you talking about with Zelensky or with them?
With Zelensky and us.
And you said in an interview yesterday that you think it's time for Zelensky to start accepting things. What things are you talking about?
I think he has to be realistic, and I do wonder about, how long is it going to be till they have an election? It's democracy. It's a long time. They haven't had an election in a long time, losing a lot of people. And I do say, at what point, when do they have an election in Ukraine? That's not casting dispersions on anybody, but they do have a massive corruption situation going on. And I do say, when are they, people are asking this question, when do they have an election? Are they going to have an election? Or are they going to just keep it going like this? So I think it's time to get that war settled. I think we had some little disputes about people, and we're going to see how it turns out. And we said before we go to a meeting, we want to know some things. They would like us to go to a meeting over the weekend in Europe, and we'll make a determination depending on what they come back with. We don't want to be wasting time. Sometimes you have to let people fight it out, and sometimes you don't. But the problem with letting people fight it out is you're losing thousands of people a week.
All right. So the reason it was worth playing that is just your point about this European kind of resentment about
that's the word, resentment.
Resentment.
Perfect.
And Trump is picked up on this. I mean, look at that news conference. He's pretty much saying that call did not go well with the Europeans, and he said, "Yeah, maybe it's not even a done deal that this meeting in Paris is going to take place, and it's not even clear who will represent the Americans." Saying, "Well, maybe Marco Rubio will represent the Americans," but it's not at all clear Rubio is going to be there.
No, I think all of them are going to say, "Look, we've done the meetings." Okay.
I think that's what Trump is saying. I don't know why waste time on more meetings.
I mean, my sense, and again, we've known this guy for well over a decade. He's getting his back up against the wall. I worry less about a flip-flop now than I did maybe a month ago. Okay. It looks like he's saying, what I've said about it, I've said it. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. But anyway, we'll obviously be following this over the weekend, and particularly on the.
Well, George, it was so important to do this speech because there's going to be nowhere else. There's going to be a deep dive into this, and it's so important. It's already a historical document. Okay. And it was like we said last time we convened, the New York Times says, "Oh, we've been working on a story of corruption for over years," though they didn't say anything about it. Okay. And then the big splash.
Right.
And then we've been chronicling it on a daily basis. Okay. And this is the same thing. This is another unprovoked attack from Russia. No, we have historical documents, right? We know exactly what the intentions of the West are.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't deny that. You can't keep putting your head in the sand.
That's right. Exactly. And they keep saying it. I mean, here's the NATO Secretary-General, and we have all these statements from Donald Tusk and Sikorsky, and then all these Kaja Kallas and von der Leyen, and they say it all. And it's clear. You are preparing for war. And the way you're doing it is by making these ridiculous assertions. Oh, Russia's doing this. Russia's invading our space, and none of this. You have any of it for all of this. Who is attacking whom? Who is sending missiles into whose territory? You haven't shown any evidence that Russia has ever attacked any NATO territory. All this talk about drone this and drone that, you haven't shown this. Well, the exploding mail, a Federal Express
Ballooning,
parcel exploded.
ballooning contraband cigarettes.
Yes, balloon exactly. That's the
You
best you've
want to
got.
go to war?
Exactly.
You want
That's
to
the best you've
follow
got.
this
Exactly.
clown?
Contraband cigarettes. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to follow this clown?
Yeah.
My goodness. And it has to end because it's important to reiterate. Where is the public debate?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Even the lead up, even lead up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. I mean, that's when John Mearsheimer, that was the last time he was seen on American media until just recently. But he was gone.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. There was debate. There was absolutely debate in the lead up to that, but there hasn't been, and that's the thing that all the political parties, even the opposition parties, are co-opted. And it's very interesting why they're co-opted. Why are they so afraid
Yeah.
of sticking their necks out? Well, because they can face punishment. I mean, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
To use American parlance, they'll primary you.
Exactly, exactly. So you got the Tory party in the UK. They're worried that Starmer is being too complacent towards Putin. Nigel Farage, supposedly the next prime minister, he's well, if any Russian aircraft strays into NATO territory, I would shoot it down. Just shoot it down without even bothering to ask any question. I'm just going to shoot it down. That's Nigel Farage. And then we have all the Maloney, and it's an amazing kind of co-opting of the opposition. So I think it's very troubling when there is no debate. That's a serious issue that this isn't being debated.
All right, everybody. This is this bookmark this one. I mean, send it out. Don't put it down the memory hole. This is very, very living, real, dangerous history we are all experiencing right now. Anyway, this is Friday. Winter is upon us. I have snow flurries outside. The boys don't like going out
No,
for.
no, no.
They're very pampered, these dogs. Like, even though they complain about the
They
tip jar.
complain all the time. I mean,
But they're very pampered. It's like Mark Rutte. They want it both ways. Okay.
yeah. They complain the tip jar. They're pampered. They complain about the tip jar. They say, the tip jar, it's tipping through emptiness. They're not happy.
That's real poetry on your
That's
part.
right. They're very poetic. That's the thing. Buddy kind of has mastered the language of poetry. So anyway, given their displeasure at empty tip jars that tip over, if you have money lying around, anything at all, any surplus funds, then everything into the tip jar. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, somehow we're going to try and get these dogs through the winter. It's a long winter, and they're going to be in a foul mood. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.